What about a capital reserve?
Well, a capital reserve, how much you're gonna put in to come up with $1 million? It would take you 10 years to come up with that money. Plus, you get, the rates now for municipal bonds are the lowest they've been in 50 years.
Probably about three something.
You can get
1%.
3%.
Is it?
Yeah. But you can, so you know, again, it's exactly, the CIP is meant to do just what we're doing. To bring it up, to talk about it, to see it's a viable option, to see what the voters think.
Okay, so how much would $1.5 million on 3% cost for 20 years? Off the top of your head, I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do that. I've been doing taxes all day, so my mind burnt out. It wouldn't be that much, it really wouldn't. And you only bond those things which have a lifespan that is greater than the bond.
Of course, but I mean, it's still, you're still paying interest.
Yeah, you're still paying interest,
So
just like we're doing on the school, just like we're doing on the sewer department.
But you still,
But you only do it on a few things. You don't do it on small things.
And the sewer one will be paid for in 2019. So if you're right, so if you're talking, 2015, talking about bonding, the other one will be almost done.
Yep.
So, I mean, we get very high regards when the auditors come, saying how low our liability is on all that stuff.
But there's 3 on the plan, right? Are we going to have more than one at a time?
Well, the idea was that maybe, we issue one general obligation bond. Now, each one will be voted on separate,
Right.
but you would combine it with one obligation bond to reduce your expense of getting that bond. So, again, it's for discussion. I'll call it a wish list, if you will. Nothing's guaranteed, but this is what the department heads came in and told us they were thinking of for the future of this town. Again, it doesn't supplant the normal approval process. So.
All right, and if I can just one more. Why 7 o'clock on a Saturday night? You see how fast they shut me down when I tried to ask?
Well, I think you got a good point.
Yeah, I think you got a good point.
Why not 1 o'clock in the afternoon? You would think that more people, maybe especially the elderly people, would have an easier time.
Arthur, what is he pointing at you for when he said elderly people?
Steve, I just think that over the years, it's been the tradition, just like the old, but I know, but let me finish. So I think that's the way it's always been. Now with deliberative session, the selectmen actually have the authority to set the time and the date. So what I'm hoping, and I did mention this to Kenny at the end of the meeting the other day, that, maybe it's time to switch the time and try to see what happens. Maybe we can get more people at 1 o'clock in the afternoon versus 7 o'clock. It's worth the try for a couple years and see what happens. I think it's a great idea. So, we just, it's in my little email calendar to pop up next November when we set the time and date to see what the board's wishes are. So that's what we'll do. So it didn't go unheard.
I didn't bring any materials. I know you didn't either, but maybe you can remember off the top of your head. I think on that on the CIP plan, round numbers, CIP plan, you were talking about a big chunk of money bonded. Yeah. And you had a number on what it would cost per year.
Yeah, and I don't remember what it was.
I think ballpark, I'm kind of thinking it was less than 100,000.
I want to say 75.
Yeah, it's less than 100,000 per year.
And that was for a bunch of projects.
That was for $3 billion?
I think we talked about it at the planning board meeting, right? That's when they did the approval and it was discussed there.
Because what I was thinking, school and town are different, but we're getting out from under $164,000 payment at school, and we're talking less than $100,000 to get these big projects done. It's just shifting money. It's not really. We're not committing ourselves to raising taxes. We're just shifting money from this project to that project.
Right, and the idea is to try to keep the tax rate as even as we can over time. So it might have been a little more than 100,000, might have been close to 200,000, which is 20 cents on the tax rate. But it gets the big projects done.
Yeah.
It could have been less than
I
that.
do have a question that's probably, I don't want it to be a big dragged out thing, but the budget, the planning board has a $31,000 override, which I know it's not an override on our budget, but they're going to see that. And that's for the MCI. MRI.
Yep.
Well, you've had
Would
to-
you just explain that so that they, I know it's money that we're already gonna spend, but
Right.
they might not know what it is.
What
They
it's
might
for.
see it on the budget, on the planning budget that shows that we're in the red and we're
Well,
really
and-
not in the red.
And I will tell you,
MRI, you said?
MRI.
Yeah, how do you get the whole town into that machine?
Very quietly.
Yeah. Lots of
Hope you're not
scanning.
claustrophobic on that.
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen had decided to sign a contract with MRI to do a feasibility study of the town. This is to help with determining the needs of the town also. We did have some other issues, which I can't get into as far as why this came about, but in order to do that, so they encumbered the $35,000. Well, per DRA, you have to have a consultant line to take the funds from, to kind of plug the money as an accounting aspect. So $35,000, the only consultant line we had was the planning board's planning consultant line.
Professional services.
Professional services. So even though the planning board did not go over on their professional service line, they were allowed $25,000 last year, and I think they still had about $6 left. We had to put $35,000 into that, out of that line, pull $35,000 out in order to encumber into a line item for this coming year. So when there's not anything there's not a lot in the town report that you're going to see anything that shows a negative for the planning board, except this MS7 report, and I've already talked to one of the planning board members, and we've put a little asterisk and a little blurb in there to say, when you do look at it and you see the appropriations for 2011, what the town appropriated, and the expenses for 2011, you are going to see an overage. So we explained why that has an overage.
You're gonna
So
see an
that people,
overage of 31,500 and.
not really, because what happens is in those same lines, it's not just the planning board's budget, it's the Heritage Commission budget also. So when you actually take the two negatives on that MS7 that I do for DRA, it's only showing about a 13,000 because of.
Would that be the 14,683?
No,
so I'm not reading it quite.
yeah, it's
But
different
that's
from what you have for paperwork as far as
State filing.
what you might see in the state filing. Like that stuff doesn't go actually in the town report, those budget items.
I think my point was I just wanted you to, when you do see these things, you're going to see $31,000 in the red, but you're going to see something next to it that's an asterisk or something,
Right.
just to let you know that it's really not in the red. They come out of surplus, correct? The money came out of surplus.
Correct.
So
Well, it's,
no.
no, not surplus. No.
No.
It's encumbered funds. At the end of every year, you start off with a $4 million budget, and at the end of the year, from everything that was expended, you might have $100,000 left over. At that point, in December, the selectmen are looking, okay, well, originally they were talking about using some of that towards the generator. Well, then the situation came up that they needed to use it for this other funding. So that's why they decided to take from the bottom line $35,000. But you have to plug it to an account number that DRA sets in order to move it. Okay? So then it goes into an encumbering account that sits there until it's expended in the 2012 year. So it's kept separate for the auditing purposes, but that it has to get plugged to an item.
everybody understand that somewhat?
I guess is what it's gonna
Probably.
Go ahead, Jim.
I don't want to confuse the issue, but what line does LGC come out of? LGC is our local government center. I don't know. We pay a fee to them every year, right, to belong?
We pay, do we pay a membership
No.
fee? I don't,
It's part of the services we
I think
get
it's
for
part
the.
of our trim package. We pay property liability, health insurance, and workers' comp
So you get the
through
free-
LGC. So
you
you
get
get the free
the
legal services and any risk management, any other things that they have to offer the town. Yeah, so we don't, yeah.
So when we consult, we're not paying by the hour to the?
We're not.
It's all free.
Free.
Well, that's a misnomer.
Well, it's free plugged into your property liability, health insurance, and workers' comp.
Well, it's good to know that they don't charge for it.
Yeah, they don't charge for it, yeah. No. There's another question. Oh, here.
Yeah, one of the things that annoys me is the town report.
Yeah.
And in there where they have expenses, and it does annoy me because there's, and I understand how you keep a budget and how you report everything. And if it's in the checkbook, you gotta put it in that book.
Right.
But you have the park department, and they get tickets to Fenway Park, they get tickets to Portland, Maine, and it's in there as an expense.
Mm-hmm.
That shouldn't be an expense, because the people that went to the ball game, the hockey game, or whatever, they should have paid their own way. And I look at that, I think,
Anytime you write a check, and you can't,
it shouldn't.
It's unfortunate.
we don't have a choice. By law, if we write a check, it has to be shown on the books as an expense. Even, remember I mentioned that additional revenue? That's where that additional revenue comes in, and offset that, so you're not paying for it in your taxes. Because it's offset by the users, going to the game, going to Fenway, going to the Pirates or whatever.
Right.
But, by law, if the town cuts a check for anything,
Right.
it has to show up in that book. What doesn't show up is all the additional revenue.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it's critical to, you know, when you talk about the expenses, to know what offsets what. And a good example of that is our the ambulance groups. You know, they cover their cost through insurance recoveries. And it doesn't get allocated to them generally; it goes into the general fund. But you know, that's money. But you never see that in the annual report. We have to show expenses. We don't have to show all the additional revenue.
But you do show revenue line items, you just don't
Just don't
specifically.
break
It doesn't say where they
All
come
right.
from, yeah. So you don't see the direct offset.
Sure.
That's why if you look at our budget book, oftentimes when we are going through the budget, Teresa will put in there, offset by outside revenue of X. This is how much we've got right on the land use. If somebody comes in for a site review, and Mike does a site review, he charges the applicant, and the applicant pays it. We'll see how much money on the line item of the budget. But it's very difficult to match the two up because there's no good place to find it. You have to physically go down line by line to find it. I wish there was a better way, because a lot of people don't understand how much additional revenue comes from the outside. Like I say, we only bill quote unquote the taxpayers half of what you heard the other night. Roughly half.
Well, go ahead, Dan.
That revenue comes in does offset the tax rate though.
Right, that's what I'm saying. We only bill, out of the $4.8 million the budget may be, you only may get billed for, actually, I've got this year.
Well,
I've got actually, last year was 4.2 million in appropriations. We billed 2.6.
when we submit to DRA the tax rate, or I don't know exactly how it goes about, all of those anticipated revenues are incorporated into what is presented to the DRA,
Correct.
as well as the expenses to determine what our tax rates are.
Right. Well, the expenses are already known because they were approved by the voters in March.
Right.
What Teresa does, she gets a crystal ball out and
And
says,
I rub it and hope we get more money.
yeah, this is the additional revenue we're going to get.
Yeah, and that has to be done, like right now, I've estimated some revenues based on what we did last year around this time. And then I do it again in September for what we've already taken in and hopefully what's projected from that time to December. You know, you can guess as much as you can, but you don't ever want to go too far over either, because if you don't get that, then you're really gonna mess up the tax rate, so.
It's just like a big checkbook.
Wow, yeah.
Well, as simple as general assistance. You never see what comes back in to general assistance when people are doing a payback plan or a house. You know, they sell their house and we go after them for a lien. We don't see that. It goes back into the general fund. A lot of people don't understand that. It's not a lot of revenue, but it is revenue. It doesn't go back into the budget. It looks like I'm spending and spending with no recourse.
Well, you do, we know that.
And anything left over at the end of the year is surplus, which is also used to offset the tax rate for the following year.
Could be offset. We, in the past couple of years, because everything's been so tight, like for 2010, I think we had 101,000 left over in the budget after the auditing process happened. That got put into what used to be called surplus, now it's undesignated fund balance and all these other words. But so that brought our unreserved fund balance up to like $1 million. So when the tax rate person comes and we start talking about this, she always asks the board, do you want to use any of that to offset the taxes? Well, we got to really probably keep about $1 million in there for any emergency purposes. So, you know, right now they haven't in the past couple of years used any of that to, because it's been so low. But now it's up to
So we're still maintaining about $1 million.
Now it's up to $1 million, and hopefully by the end of this year it'll be $1,060,000, and you know, just kind of grow it a little bit here and there.
But it's not cash.
That's right. That's
No,
what I was
it's
gonna
not
say. It's not cash.
No, it's not cash. It's,
It could be unpaid property taxes.
Right.
That are on the books, but they're not paid, so it's not cash.
It's still an asset.
it's still
Right.
an
So,
asset.
Right.
but it's also meant to cover, remember, it's not just covering the town expense, it's also covering the school
School.
expense.
Right.
Because the school does not maintain its own fund balance.
Right.
The
gave us
SAU
funds
does,
back.
but not the school district.
Well, if that's it, I'm gonna cut it short now, and I got a couple things I still wanna say, but I wanna thank these guys. I mean, this has been a great help to me, myself, and I hope that everybody enjoyed it. I appreciate it, and I'd like to thank them all three of them very much, so. As always, there's always a money problem in any functions. I do need donations to keep this thing running from everybody. And Vivian's gonna run around, put you on the spot, so don't hesitate, throw a buck or something in there. That'd be great. I got website. I do,
I'll take the thing.
Ed, our cameraman, has a couple of updated things that he'd like to say to us, that if anybody came to our last meeting that we had on the Agenda 21, Ed has a couple of things he'd like to say. If he wants to come up and say a couple of things for a few minutes before you guys go, I'd appreciate that.
It's only one thing.
One thing.
One thing.
Guys, just give him a few minutes to speak.
Those of you that don't know me, I'm Ed Comeau. I own and operate GovernmentOversite.com. That's spelled SIT.com, where this meeting will show up once I upload it. Who here saw my Agenda 21 presentation?
We were all, most of us were there. Did you see it, Al? The Agenda 21?
Basically, the next week after I did that presentation, a New Hampshire House bill was introduced. It's 1634. It says it's an act prohibiting the state, counties, towns, and cities from implementing programs of, expending money for, receiving funding from, or contracting with the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. I mentioned this non-government organization in my presentation. Now this is monumental that this Agenda 21, which most people have never heard of, including our elected officials, are actually trying to basically vet it out of our republic. I'm just going to read the last paragraph. It says, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, contracts, expenditures prohibited. No county nor any department thereof shall implement programs of, expend any sum for, be a member of, receive funding from, contract for services from, or give financial or other forms of aid to the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. In furtherance of the United Nations program known as Agenda 21. Now, a lot of our, not a lot, some of our elected officials, Representative Cartwright, Representative Pettengill, Representative Lou Vita and Representative Tremblay, they're concerned about it, as I was. That's why I presented the information of what Agenda 21 is. Now, there's 4 towns that belong to ICLAI already. They have a contract with them. They pay them dues. It's Wolfboro, Epping, Portsmouth, Keene, and there's one more now, Nashua. Now, according to population, they could pay up to $1,200 to $2,000 for membership. It's just an important note that a lot of people accuse a lot of people over the years that Agenda 21 was a conspiracy theory, that it didn't really exist. Well, it does exist, and it's just starting to hit mainstream where our own elected representatives are trying to vet it out of our system. Now, just for a little quick note, Agenda 21 was started in 1992. It's basically a non-legal binding, or a non-legal policy of environmental protection. But just as we all know what the Constitution is, and we know that because we debated it, we also need, as a republic, to debate what this Agenda 21 is. It's very serious. It may have started off good, maybe hopefully it'll end good, but obviously it's a concern. So people who do not know what Agenda 21 is, you can find it. It's all over the internet. You can go to the United Nations actual website and download a copy of it, and you can read it. And once you do read it, you're going to be stunned at how this is getting into our planning documents. It's getting into our Conservation Commission boards, our planning boards, our zoning boards, also our planning laws, i.e. smart growth principles, are all principles that started out in Agenda 21. A lot of people say it may not be a bad thing. If it's not so bad, we need to debate it. We need to find out where it's from and what its true purpose may be. We need to question this. And that's about it. That's all I have as for Agenda 21.
Ed, does that affect us here in Wakefield?
Does Agenda 21 or does
well,
this?
Well, as an example, yeah, right now. And can you think of anything in Wakefield that?
Probably the most recent thing is the Chapter 16 of the agenda is in support of a treaty called the Convention on Biological Diversity. If you read the treaty, it's basically an inventory of natural resources. And they also, the idea behind the convention is to reduce the populated landmass by 50% by putting land in conservation. Now legally, in the United States, you cannot just go and put land aside by eminent domain because we have private property rights in this country. Countries like Canada and all across Europe have joined in the treaty. We have not signed the treaty, but all the people that are pushing the actual implementation of that agenda of the conservation of biological diversity are basically doing it voluntarily. So they're approaching people to ask them to give up land to put it in protection for perpetuity through the federal government and federal government programs. Now, what's the connection between Agenda 21 in the United Nations and the federal government? The only entity that can have an agreement with the international community is our federal government. So legally, when someone says that all these programs are United Nations programs, that's not actually accurate. What's accurate is federal people go to the United Nations, they agree on the agenda, and then they come back, and since they never seem to debate it in Congress, they use executive orders. Now, you all know executive orders are used over and over again to implement all kinds of things. But most of all of this is being done through executive order. And that way, planners, planning associations, etc., American Planning Association especially, can implement these programs legally and never say it's the United Nations or any type of United Nations agreement.
Well, what I was thinking about is the Union Meadows. Is that?
Well, I would say that would be that's a legal, voluntary way of implementing the Convention on Biological Diversity. It's not illegal. Your people are voluntarily giving up land to put it in conservation to protect the environment. I personally wish people would speak about the Convention on Biological Diversity, so at least the person selling it knows. Because anytime somebody sells land and gives up private property to the federal government, I don't know if that's such a good thing to do, especially now with its track record. And it would be a good idea that if people are going to give up land, they need to find out what the Convention on Biological Diversity is. So I would say, for now, it's Union Meadows, but there's numerous things. I could stay in here all night talking about different planning and zoning laws and heritage sites. Is amazing. And this year, in June, you will hear on the news of the Earth Summit 2012. Every 10 years, the United Nations gets together. Back in 1992, it was 173 nations. Now it's 194 nations. They're meeting this year, and this convention will be discussed because there's a rush right now across the country to put as much land into conservation as possible so you can go to the Senate and have the Senate of our nation ratify that treaty. Because people are going to say, well, we already have the land set aside, so let's just ratify it. So that's the game plan. Of course, the only dishonest thing I don't like about it is that people are not being informed about it. If we all debate that this convention and Agenda 21 and the United Nations has the best idea of how to protect the environment and govern our own resources, then we need to discuss that and debate it. We'll all agree, just like we did with the Constitution, we'll all agree on it. So if you haven't heard about Agenda 21, now's the time to find out about it.
Thank you. Okay, everybody. I thank you for coming. It was a good showing, and I hope you got a lot out of it. And we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Come back now,
That was really good. Really informative. Yeah, and I really